Hi, everyone. My name's Lily. I'm an alcoholic. My sponsor tells me that I need to suit up and show up whenever I'm asked, and that I need to dress up when I speak, and that includes being on Zoom. And so I dressed up for you tonight. I hope you like the way I look. Oh, I forgot. Okay, that's better. Hi, everyone. I have a sponsor who has a sponsor. I sponsor the girls that I sponsor. So we're well grounded in Alcoholics Anonymous. My sobriety date is November the 8th of 1989. And I'm a member in good standing of the Scarborough Route 1 group. You know, I didn't know what a member in good standing meant when somebody first mentioned that to me, that they were a member in good standing. I thought, well, la-di-da for you. You know, I didn't understand. I didn't want to come to AA. I had no desire to quit drinking. There were a lot of people in my life that had a desire for me to quit drinking. I just wasn't among them. I knew that I was alcoholic, and I made the promise that every alcoholic makes, and that is, tomorrow I won't drink. But sincerely, I knew that I couldn't not drink, and I decided that the heck with it. I just wouldn't. I just keep on drinking because I couldn't. I tried to not drink, and it never worked out for me. And I never thought about getting help. You know, I just never thought about getting help. I'll tell you just a little bit about my drinking. You know, I didn't come from an alcoholic home. I came from a very loving home. Nobody else in my family appears to suffer from the disease of alcoholism. I'm the only one, although there are times when I'd like to dunk my brothers in alcohol so they could get the 12 steps, because in my humble opinion, I think there's no other way to live this life, is to have the 12 steps. How lucky we are, you know, how very blessed we are. But my drinking took me to places that, you know, women shouldn't go. You know, I had that thing that most alcoholic women, my marriage ended in divorce because he was alcoholic, and I didn't think I had a drinking problem. But whenever he tried to quit drinking, I thought, well, he's the one with the problem. You know, I can still drink. And that should have been a sign for me, but it wasn't, you know. And so I did the things that alcoholic women did. You know, I realized that he wasn't able to care for us because he was chronic end stage alcoholic. So I went to college, I got a degree, I came out of college, I bought a house. You know, I did all these things. The bottom line is that I also began to drink more and more and more because I didn't have anybody telling me what to do, and I could do whatever I wanted. And the sad part of my story is that when my kids needed me the most, I was there the least. You know, I couldn't be a good mom because I was a barroom fly. You know, I thought that everything was fine. You know, they had food, they had a roof over their head. What did they need? I didn't understand because my disease was having its way with me. You know, I didn't get the part that they needed emotional support. You know, they were teenagers, they needed their mother to be home. I couldn't be home. I couldn't be home. You know, I got a really good job with the federal government, and I quit that job. And the reason I quit that job is because I saw this place on my way home one day, and it was called the Silver Spur Saloon. And I thought, I want to work there. I want to be a cowgirl. I've always wanted to be a cowgirl. And so I quit a really good job with the federal government to get a job as a cowgirl. You know, I loved that job. You know, I had to wear a cowboy hat, and cowboy boots, and, you know, the little denim skirt and the vest. And oh, I just thought I was everything and then some, you know. And the problem is that when I got done with my shift, I didn't know enough to go home. So I'd stay there and drink. I'd stay there and drink, and I'd stay there and drink. And what happened for me is, you know, at some point in my life, I was driving a 1972 Pontiac Ventura. And at some point, I lost the front seat in that car, and I have no idea to this day what happened to that. But you know, I had friends, and so they bolted a milk crate to the floor so I could sit on that while I drove. And one night I was driving home. It was in February. It's really cold in Maine in February, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and the blue lights come on, and the cop comes up to the car. And I knew intuitively not to open the door, that if he saw me sitting on a milk crate, it probably was going to be a problem. It never occurred to me that it might be a problem that I was drunk. I just knew that sitting on a milk crate was probably against the law. And I rolled down my window, and he said, "Where have you been?" And I told him a big fat lie. I told him, I started crying, and I said, "My horse died, and I've just come from burying him." And I knew that was a lie, but that's the way I am. I tell lies and I believe them myself. And I mourned the loss of a horse I never owned. And he asked me where I lived, and I said, "Just down the street." And he said, "Why don't you get there?" And one of my last great ideas was, with all these friends of mine, it got summertime, it got hot in Maine, and I thought maybe it'd be a great idea if we all went skinny dipping after work. And I had never been skinny dipping before, but I thought it was a good idea. And so we piled in my vehicle, and off we went. And we went to this bridge in Windham, Maine, and we took our clothes off, and we folded them all up nice and neat. And I put the keys on the front tire of the car. I don't know why I did that, but that's just the way I was at that time. And we all jumped off this bridge. I wouldn't have jumped off that bridge for $1 million, but drunk, and it was my idea. I had to follow through. And again, the blue lights came on, and I said to my friends, "Let's swim downstream." And we did. We swam downstream, and we treaded water until the cops left. And then we came up through somebody's backyard. And it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's 6 of us, and we're all drunk. And we're really quiet, like drunks can be, you know what I mean? And shh, shh. And we got up to the vehicle, and the cops had taken our clothes. And one of the guys that was in the group was married. And he said to me, "Lily, my wife is going to be really pissed if I show up at home and my hair's all wet." And I said, "Oh, well, why don't you get in the front seat and stick your head out the window, and I'll drive really fast and you can blow dry your hair." And that's what he did. He got in the car, he stuck his head out, and I drove fast, and the blue lights came on again. And the cop came up to the car, and he shined a flashlight in the car, and there's 6 naked people sitting in this car. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, it's really hot. We're just driving around trying to get cooled off." That's what my drinking was like. That's what my drinking was like, how I got to AA, I want to tell you what it was like. I consider November 8th to be my sobriety date. And this is why. I had my last drink of alcohol on October 28th, 1989. And on the day before that, I had dyed my hair purple. I was 45 years old, and it was at a time when people didn't have colored hair. Today, everybody has colored hair. It's no big deal. Back then, it was a big deal. And I had this outrageously purple hair. It was so purple that, if you went out in the sun, it would literally stop traffic. And anyway, I went to the bar, and I told the bartender that I thought I was an alcoholic. I wasn't sure, and he should keep the drinks coming while I made up my mind. And sometime during the course of that night, I remember saying to that bartender, "I'm going to ask God to give me a sign tonight. And if he gives me a sign, I'm going to quit drinking." And I really thought that that's the way it was going to be, And what happened for me is this. By now, I'm driving a van. I've got a job working for a school department, driving a van. I never knew whether I had my van or the school van. And that night I went out, and I got in the back of that van, and it was my van. And in the back of that van, I had a Coleman cooler full of booze, and I had a little bed in the back, and I had a change of clothes. And I remember getting in that van and saying a little prayer like, "God, please give me 1/10 of the faith that my mother has." And the next day I went, and I was driving a 15-passenger van. I had 15 kids on board, driving across a country road. And I broke out in a sweat, and I thought, geez, I don't feel good. I really don't feel good, but I'm driving, and I got all these kids on board. And then I got this pressure in my chest, and I felt like an elephant was sitting on my chest. And I thought, good God, I'm having a heart attack. Please, God, don't let me go off the road with all these kids on this bus. And I made it to work, and I collapsed. And the next thing I remember is waking up in the ambulance thinking it didn't need to be that big a sign, and now I'm in the hospital, and I'm in intensive care, and I've got tubes and monitors everywhere. And they had called my mom and my brother, and they said they didn't know if I was going to make it. And I didn't know that. What I know is that when I came to, I had tubes and monitors and all this stuff. And I was laying on this stretcher, and my hair, I was laying on a white pillowcase, and my hair was outrageously purple. And I looked over and I saw my mother and my brother, and I thought, you better come up with something quick. And my brother come over to the edge of the bed and he said, Jesus, what happened? And I said, I don't know, but whatever they're giving me, it's turning my hair purple. And I knew that was a lie. But, it's just the way I am. I'm an alcoholic. We'll tell lies when the truth suffices. What happened for me is this. The beautiful home that I bought was destroyed. I absolutely had destroyed that house between me and my teenage children, who I didn't know what was going on when I wasn't there. We had destroyed that house. There was no locks on the doors. The living room was painted pumpkin orange. There was no carpet left on the floor. I'd long since taken cutting up a rug very seriously. And every time I'd drink, I'd cut up another piece of rug and throw it out the front door, and the neighbors would know I was on a roll. And my life was in a shambles. And I want to tell you, I got out of the hospital on November the 8th. I could not let my family take me home because they had not seen my home. I did not invite my family to my house the last 2 years of my drinking. So I got a friend to drop me off. And I want to describe for you what that house looked like on November the 8th. I walked up the driveway, and on the door, there was a note from the bank, and they were foreclosing on my house. And I opened the door, and there was no heat and no lights and no running water and no telephone. Everything had been shut off while I was in the hospital. There were no children there, and I was like, well, I'm not staying here. And I got in my car and I drove up to the bar, and I walked in and I ordered a shot of tequila and a beer chaser. And I doctored my hand all up to do that shot. And as I lifted that glass, I looked up, and there was a mirror behind the bar. I'd always sat in the seat. It was that mirror was always there. But that night I saw myself, and I swear to God, it was like a split second. It was like snapping your finger. But to me, it seemed like a full-length movie. And I saw this person looking back at me. And what I saw looking back at me was a hopeless, helpless, pathetic, drunk mother. And all of a sudden, this thought came into my head that, my kids deserve way more than they were getting, way more than they were getting. And I put the drink down and I walked out. And that's why I consider that to be my sobriety date. I didn't go to a meeting until about 4 or 5 days later. There was a lady at my work that was my immediate supervisor, and she invited me to go to dinner at her house. And I said I would come, and got closer and closer to the time to go. And remember, I told you I asked God for 1/10 of the faith that my mother had. And what happened for me was this: I knew that I wasn't going to go to her house because she was mentioned in AA, and I thought, I don't want to go to AA. I don't know what it is, but I don't think I want to go. And this voice, my mother's voice, I heard in the back of my head, and it said, Lily, if you're not going to go, you should call her and tell her, because it'd be really rude not to show up. And I went to my phone and it was dead. And it never occurred to me to go to a phone booth. And for anybody that's really young here, there were these little houses on the side of the road where they had these phones, and you put a quarter in and dialed a number, and somebody on the other end answered. It never occurred to me to go to a phone booth and call her up. I drove 15 miles to her house to tell her that I couldn't come. And she said, come right in. And she had a gift for me wrapped up with a big bow on it. And when I unwrapped it, it was a big blue book. And in big white letters, it said Alcoholics Anonymous. And I broke out in that sweat again. And I thought to myself, how in the hell am I going to get out of this? And she said, why don't you read what I wrote inside the front cover? And inside the front cover, she wrote, to Lily, my friend with love. May you someday know how important this day is to me. Fasten your seatbelt and welcome to the greatest adventure of your life, one day at a time. And that is exactly what it has been for me. We had dinner, we went to a meeting. The very first guy that stuck his hand out to me said, welcome, you're amongst your own kind. I looked at him and said, I don't think so, bucko. The next person I met was as tall as the first guy was, short. He had a big shock of white hair, big toothy grin, and he had a belt buckle. It was right about my eye level, and the belt buckle said bullshit. And he said, keep coming back, honey. It gets better and better every day. Then they offered a white chip. And I thought, you have to be kidding. There was a room full of losers. I had taken all of your inventory. I had judged every one of you when I walked in there. What a bunch of losers. Look at them. They're all sitting here, and they went around the room and they all introduced themselves as alcoholics. When they got to me, I said, I'm Lily and I'm an alcoholic. Oh my God, I'm an alcoholic. and they offered a white chip to help you start a new way of life. And I thought, you got to be kidding. You don't drink and they pay you in poker chips? I don't think so. But what she said saved this drunk's life. You see, I was brought up with 4 brothers, and they used to tease me unmercifully. I also lived with both of my grandmothers. My mother took care of both of my grandmothers because they both were unable to live alone. So it was my mom, my dad, my 2 grandmothers, and 4 brothers. And they used to tease me, and I would cry. And one day my grandmother said to me, Lilllie, if you don't want them to bother you and you don't want them to make you cry, don't let them know you're afraid of them. And what I didn't know is that I would carry that the rest of my life, that no matter how afraid I was, I never let anybody know it. I never, ever would admit that I was afraid of anything. So this woman got up and she said, here we help you start a new way of life by offering you a white chip. If you're too afraid to get one, see me after the meeting and I'll give you one. And I thought, I had taken your inventory. You're all a bunch of losers. If you think I'm too afraid to get the chip, well, I'm not. And I marched up there and got it. And, the miracle happened right then and there. People started saying stupid things right away. Like, if you think you want to drink, put this in your mouth. If it melts, you can have one. And I think there's probably a few people out there that did that, but I did it. They said to eat ice cream if I felt like drinking, I should eat ice cream. I ate a lot of ice cream the first 30 days. If you had stock in Klondike bars, you would have been doing well then. They said, get a sponsor. Every time I saw somebody, they were like, get a sponsor, get a sponsor, get a sponsor. And I finally got a sponsor, and I picked this woman that I drank with because I thought she'd already seen all my crap and I wasn't going to have to do 4 and 5. It was a big mistake. This woman, she was only a year sober and I was the first person she ever sponsored, but she took it very, very seriously. We went through the big book, page by page by page. We started the first day. She said to me, you have an assignment tomorrow. Call me at 6 a.m. and tell me what's on the first page of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was so excited. I went home that first night and I read the whole book cover to cover. Couldn't wait to call her. At 6 a.m. I called her and I told her what was on the first page. And she said, you're wrong, and hung up on me. And she kept doing that until I finally figured out that on the first page of the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, there was nothing. And she said, that's where you write my name and my number. I'm your sponsor. And you don't ever want to forget this number. And she began to take me through the steps, and I'm here to talk to you about steps 8 and 9. And, we went through the steps and we did all these things. And I kind of was excited about step 8. I had made this list for myself and Jesus, I thought I was doing great. I knew that the first people that I owed amends to was my children. I didn't know how to make amends, but they were on the list, they were on the list. And then I put all my ex-boyfriends on the list, and then I had employers and, where I had stolen money and, my church that I'd walked away from because I got mad one day. And I took this list, and I went to my sponsor, and the first thing she said to me was, well, you can scratch all those ex-boyfriends off. You ain't got anything to say to them. And she said to me, you left somebody off the list. I said, what are you talking about? She said, well, where are you on that list? And I said, well, why should I be on the list? And she said, you need to make amends. You need to forgive yourself. Are you ready to do that? And I was like, I didn't know what she was talking about. I was like, she's crazy. What is she talking about? She said, I want you to go home and I want you to think about, she said, how you'd forgive yourself. And you need to ask yourself some questions. And I was like, well, what kinds of questions? And she said, well, if you were going to ask for forgiveness, who would you ask for forgiveness from? And I thought about that for a minute. I wrote it down, because I didn't want to forget it. And she said, and then what would you ask for forgiveness for? And then, are you ready to forgive yourself? She said, when you get done doing that, let's talk. And I had to go home and I had to make that list, and that was hard. That was hard, because I thought, I'd ask my kids to forgive me, because I was a terrible mother. They had all kinds of material things, but they didn't have me. And they needed a mother. They needed a mom, and I didn't know how to be mom at that time. I just didn't, And she said, well, one of the ways that you can make amends to your children, she said, you need to sit and talk with each one of them individually. And you need to tell them what it is that you think you did wrong. And then you need to ask them how they saw it. and you need to be quiet because it's not your business. It's not your business, she said, what their feelings are, because it's their feelings. And you need to listen to what they have to say. And then you get to ask them one question. What do I have to do to make this right? What do I have to do to make this right? You know, I want to tell you about one of the amends that I made. One of the amends that I made was the second amends to my second son. And I had I had 4 children. One of them died of SIDS. And then I had 3 children left. And out of those 3 children, 2 of them became alcoholic. And one of them wasn't an alcoholic. You know, he just was this shining star in our life. You know, he was handsome and he was smart and he was funny and he was all of it, you know. And by now I had been in AA for a while and I had made an amends to him on the phone. But an opportunity come for me to make amends to him in person. And what happened was I was asked to speak at a convention in Cape May, New Jersey in 2002. In March of 2002. And I called him up, and by now he was a policeman in Washington, D.C. And I told him that I was going to be speaking in Cape May. And he said, Mom, he said, is it all right if I come? He said, I can take the ferry from Delaware and come over. And I said, sure, you can come. And he came and he met all my friends in AA, you know, and he met Jerry and Jill and Joe. And as a matter of fact, in my big book, I have a picture of him and me and Jerry and Jill and Joe. And you know, we were in Cape May and we went on the beach and we were picking up these white rocks and we took our shoes and socks off and we walked in the water and Jerry and Jill were like, what are you people, crazy? And we were like, well, it's just sort of like the ocean in Maine in the summertime. You know, we're used to it being cold. And then I told him that I wanted him to help me pick up these white rocks. There were these unusual white rocks on the beach and they were smooth stones, but they were white. And so we're picking them up. And he said to me, Mom, why are we picking up these white rocks? And I said, we're picking these white rocks up because your crazy mother now leads one-day women retreats for women that can't spend a whole weekend at a retreat. And I don't know what I'm going to do with these rocks, but I know that I'm going to need them. And he said, okay. And we picked up all those rocks, you know, and then we raced to the top of the lighthouse. And then he heard me speak that night, you know, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, Mom, he said, I don't know where that came from. He said, but it really touched a lot of people in the room. And he said, you should keep on doing it. And I said to him, you know, that's a gift from God, because I wouldn't give a book report when I was in school, you know. And my son worked in Anacostia in Washington, D.C., which is a really hard area of Washington. And he worked with drug addicts and kids that were children of drug addicts. And they loved him there, you know. And so I knew I was doing what I was supposed to be doing and he was doing what he was supposed to be doing. You know, and 6 weeks later, I got the phone call that no mother wants to get. That phone call was that Sammy had passed away. Sammy died of a disease called sepsis. He had recently had a tattoo. He was working undercover, and the boys and the men in his platoon felt that he might have gotten an infection from that tattoo. And I don't know if that's what happened or not. All I know is that Sammy was gone, and I called one person in AA. You know, that person was my sponsor. And the next thing I knew, my house was full of people from AA. And you people came and you held me up when I didn't know how to hold myself up. And you taught me how to walk with dignity and grace, you know, and to walk behind that casket. And, you know, my son had a hero's funeral, you know, and the point that I guess I sort of got lost there for a minute, I'm sorry. What I meant to say was that weekend, you know, face to face, I got to tell my son that I was sorry for the way that I acted when they were teenagers. And, you know, that I didn't, I was just sorry. And what could I do to make amends? And he said, keep doing what you're doing, Mom. I love you. And it's so good to see you sober. So, you know, did I forgive myself? I did, because my sponsor said to me, if you can't forgive yourself, how do you think you can ask other people to forgive you, you know? And I didn't know how to forgive myself, you know? And she said, why don't you start by cleaning up that house you live in? And she said, do it using the 3-foot method. And I was like, what is that? And she said, open the front door and clean 3 feet. Clean everything in that 3 feet. Figure out what you're keeping. If you're keeping it, put it away. If you're getting rid of it, put it in your car and take it to the dump. She said, and when you get done, put a chair in that 3 feet and call me. And I did that, and I didn't do it because I was happy. I did it because I was ugly, and I got to tell you that when I first came to AA and for a long time afterwards, I sort of thought that they had a special school for sponsors. Sponsors would go to the school and they'd get really smart and they'd know all these questions and they'd know all the answers and tell you stupid stuff to do. And then those of you that couldn't cut it as a sponsor were spies. And so she would tell me things to do, like they were going to foreclose on my house. And she came up with this idea that maybe I should go and ask the bank for forgiveness, and make an appointment with this manager. And I'm thinking to myself, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard in my life. She said, why don't you tell him you're an alcoholic? I'm like, that's going to be helpful, but I did it because I was afraid that if I didn't, the spies would report me and I'd get kicked out of AA. It kept me sober for a long, long time, and I made that amends at the bank. They didn't want my house. I didn't really want it either, but, they said, you got to pay us. Can you pay us an extra $80 a month? And then I went home and I called my sponsor and she said, what happened? And I said, they want me to pay an extra $80 a month. What do I do now? And she said, pay them. Because that's the other part of it. You can't make an amends to somebody and then not follow through, and they were on my list, they were on my list. I did some horrible things, I didn't pay my mortgage payment. To hell with you guys. You don't need my money. You're a bank. I need my money to drink, and I had all these justifications, and then she talked to me about my employers. I had a job that I was in charge of petty cash. And a lot of times I'd borrow money from petty cash to go drinking, and she asked me how much money I took. And I said, I don't really know. And she said, well, whatever you come up with, double it. She said, and you can't really go to your boss and tell him that you stole money from them because you might lose your job and you really need that job to keep that house going for your children. She said, so what I want you to do is every time you get paid, I want you to put money back in that petty cash fund. I want to tell you that I worked for that school for 34 years. Out of that 34 years, I was sober for 19 of those years. And for 19 of those years, every time I got paid, I put $20 in the petty cash bag. I don't know if I paid them back. I sort of think I did, but when I retired, she said, now I want you to give money to charity anonymously. Pick a charity that you love and give them money, because you don't know if you paid back that money or not, but it'll make you feel good about you. And if you can't feel good about you, you'll drink again. And I thought, she's crazy. She's just crazy. And then there was my church. My church was on that list. And I just walked away from my church. God never gave up on me, but I gave up on God. I was just like really angry. At what happened at my church was that I was on the parish council, and somebody on the parish council knew that I was divorced, and they went to the Monsignor of the church and said they didn't think it was right that a divorced woman was on the parish council. And so that Monsignor talked to me and he said, I don't think you could stay on the parish council. It's upsetting people in the parish that you're divorced. And I was so angry that I walked out of there and I didn't go back to church for a long, long time. To hell with them. To hell with them. Who do they think they are? Who are they to judge me? And I just was so angry and so hurt. And yet, on the other hand, I'd come home and I'd be on my knees in front of my bed in the morning, asking God to keep this drunk sober for another day. And then at the end of the day, I'd be saying, thank you for keeping this drunk sober another day. And I'm still angry at my church. And, so I meet with my sponsor and I'm like, I don't know what to do about that, because I'm just really upset, that they would judge me. And she said, well, you were worthy of being judged. And I was angry at her. I was like, well, what the hell does that mean? I'm worthy of being judged. She said, it's not the church that you're mad at. She said, it's the one person in the church that dared to say something to you. And you didn't have a good answer. So being the typical alcoholic that you are, you pick up your kit and caboodle and out the door you go, and to hell with them, and you'll never do anything for them again, right? And I said, that's right. And she said, you need to go find that priest. And you need to sit down and you need to talk to that priest and you need to tell him how you felt when he said that to you. And then you need to tell him that you walked away from the church. And if you want to come back, you need to ask, can I come back? And I thought, well, I'm never going to do that. I'm never, ever going to do that. I hate that guy. I hate that guy. You know, how much worse can it be, you know, to be a Catholic, to be a drunk, and now to hate him on, you know, I'm going straight to hell. I know that, you know, but eventually the day came that I had to talk to this priest. I had to talk to him because it was eating me inside every time I see him, you know. I didn't go to church, but I'd see him on the street every time I heard his name. I still hung out with people that were going to church and they would talk about him and I'd think, yeah, that jackass. And so it was eating me inside, you know, and my sponsor said, if you don't do something, Lilllie, you're going to drink. You need to go have a face-to-face with that man, you know. And I looked at it like that, you know, I'm going to have a face-to-face with a man. He's no better than I am. He's just a man. He's a man that is, you know, that, yeah, he studied and he's gone to school and he's learned how to be a priest. But, you know, I need to talk to him about how it felt for him to tell me that I wasn't worthy to serve on his parish council because I was divorced, you know. And he told me that he had thought about that over the years and he thought about how weak he was, that he gave in. And he said, and I missed you. I missed you coming to church. And he was sorry that the way that he said things to me made me feel like I was unwanted and unworthy of God's love. You know, today I'm a member in good standing of that church, you know, and he's not there anymore. And I can't really say that I'm unhappy that he's gone, but I realized that, you know, the church isn't the priest. The church is the church. The church is like AA. It's all of us. It's all of us, you know. It's the people that are in those pews that are the church. Anyway, so I made my amends there, you know, and I thought it was over, you know, but it's never over, you know. It's never over because we always find somebody else that we owe an amends to. You know, and then my sponsor said to me, well, where's your ex-husband on that list? And I said, he ain't ever going to be on that list. I don't owe him nothing. He's an idiot. I owe him nothing. And she said, well, I think you better look at that. She said, I think you owe him amends. And I was just so, I'll tell you, this is what I said to her. I'll tell you how my amends for him is going to go. He's going to be walking down the street. I'm going to be driving a big old truck. And when I see him on the street, I'm going to lose control of that truck. I'm going to run him over. And then in my panic, I'm going to throw it in reverse and back over him. And she was like, and I suppose you think that's funny. And I said, no, I just think it's the truth. I just think it's what I'm going to do. And she said, well, I don't think so. She said, I don't think so. She said, what I want you to do is I want you to go home and write a letter to him. I could not wait to do that. I'm going home. I'm going to write him a letter. You SOB, you didn't do this and you didn't do that. And you were jerking. You blah, 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 blah. And I had a whole mile long list, you know, everything, every little thing that I ever thought that he did that was wrong was on that list. And then she called me up and she said, did you write the letter? And I said, yeah. And she said, throw it away. I said, what do you mean throw it away? She said, well, did you invite God to come in before you sat down and wrote the letter? And I said, no, you didn't tell me to do that. And she said, well, I'm telling you to do it now. She said, I want you to go back to the table. I want you to sit down. I want you to invite God in, make a chair for God. She said, and then I want you to start writing all over again. And, you know, it had a whole different flavor the second time around, because I realized that he had missed all of the things that my kids had accomplished. He missed the first Little League, you know, he missed my son being an all-star Little League player. He missed the hockey games, you know, he missed the school plays. He missed the dance, you know, he missed the prom. You don't get that stuff back. You can't get that stuff back. You know, and now my daughter's going to get married and she said, I want you to clean house with him. You need to go make an amends to him. You need to clean up your side of the street. She said, the day to have your issues ironed out isn't going to be the day your daughter gets married. She wants her father to be there. You need to make your amends to him. You know, and I went and I sat down. I mean, I cleaned up my side of the street. My side of the street was that I was too young to get married. I believed in the idea of love. I didn't really know what love was. I just thought love was like, I'm going to take this hostage and he's going to do what I tell him to do. And when he don't, so I had to sit down and look him in the eye and say, I didn't have any right to be married when I got married. I got married because what was presented to me my whole life was a loving father and mother, that my mother stayed home and took care of the kids and my father went to work every day. My dad came home every night. My mother always had put on fresh lipstick, combed her hair, had a clean apron on. And he always walked in. He said, "Hi, honey, how was your day?" And she said, "Great. How was yours?" And then he'd say, "Where are the kids?" That's what I know. That's what I knew about a marriage. I didn't know that there were struggles and there were financial problems. And I didn't know about any of that behind the scenes stuff because I didn't ever see any of that. I only saw my father and mother being loving towards one another. So that's what I expected marriage to be. I'm going to get married to this guy and he's going to come home every day and he's going to say, "Hi, honey." Well, that isn't the way it was at all, but I realized that when he needed me to be a stand-up wife, I didn't know how to be that. When he tried to quit drinking, my thought was he's the one with the drinking problem. So I made an amends to him. And I asked him when it was all over what I needed to do to make it right. And he said, "You already did that." He said, "You brought our children up and you did a fine job of it." And I said, "Well, I made a lot of mistakes along the way." He said, "Well, you might have." He said, "But they're damn good kids, And then I said, "Well, I have a question I want to ask you." I said, "How is it that you could forsake your kids? I mean, I don't understand how you could tell your kids you were going to come and visit them and then you didn't. And you'd come and tell them you were going to pick them up, but then you wouldn't show up. I don't understand." And he said to me, he said, "I really don't have a good excuse, but this is what it is." He said, "The woman that I met told me that I had to make a choice. It was either her or those kids." And he said, "And I have always been afraid of being alone. And when she threw that ultimatum down to me, I said, I'll take her." And he said, "And I'd like to tell you something, Lilllie. I wish I could tell you today that that would be different." He said, "But I'm still that afraid of being alone." He said, "If the woman I'm with today told me tomorrow that I had to give up my relationship with my kids, I would do it all over again because I'm that afraid of being alone." I walked out of that place with a whole different look at him, like what possibly could have happened to him that made him that afraid that he could forsake his kids. I don't understand that. I don't understand that. That's not the way I was brought up. I was brought up in this Irish Catholic family where we loved one another, we fought with one another, but when it was over, we loved each other, and to this day, my brothers would do anything for me, and I would do anything for them. But we get together. Sometimes we have knockdown, drag out arguments. I'll tell you, it's just the way it is. It's family, it's family. I'm still working on steps 8 and 9. Every now and then something comes up. Something comes up and it's like, oh yeah, remember that person? Remember that person that you owe money to? And I try to find them. And if I can't find them, I put extra money in the church basket. It's just the way it is. A little bit about my life today. I was at one point in my life that my mother had a roommate, her and her best friend. Both of them lost their husbands and they moved in together and they were great friends. One cooked, one cleaned, they were known as the two old birds. And one day Jerry got sick and she had to go in a nursing home. And my mother was very upset. And I went down and talked to my mother and I said, what would you like, Mom? And she said, "I want to go out of this house feet first." And I said, "I'm in a position to make that happen." And my brother moved into my house and the one that I had restored and 3 feet at a time. And I moved in and took care of my mother. And that lasted for 15 years. And we had a great relationship. We had a lot of fun. My sponsors everybody in AA knew my mother. I tell you this funny little story about it. One time, this friend of mine, Ricky, she was known as the crazy hat lady. And she was having a birthday party and I was going to be away. And she said, "Well, don't you worry about it." She said, "I invited your mother to the party and I've made arrangements for somebody to pick her up." So my mother went to this party and I went to Nashville, and when I came home, I got a phone call from one of my friends and they said, your mother had a ball at the party. And they said, but I didn't know your mother was in recovery. And I said, what are you talking about? And they said, well, somebody asked her how long she'd been in recovery. And she said, 3 years. And so I said to her, Mom, why did you tell those people you remember recovery for 3 years? And she said, well, I had my knee done 3 years ago. Mom could hang out with anybody. And we had a wonderful relationship. And I'll tell you, in the end, my mother got the daughter she deserved, not the one she was stuck with when I was out there drinking and doing my deal. And I made a living amends to my mother, and I made it every day for 15 years, and I was with my mother when she passed, and she went exactly the way she wanted to. She just wanted to go to sleep and not wake up. And she said, and you make damn sure when I leave here that I go feet first and don't let them put me in a body bag. Tell them to wrap me in a quilt. And that's the way she went. People in this program know my mother. And again, the church was full, just like it was when my son passed. The church was absolutely full because you see, I'm a person that came to AA and after a while I got serious. In the beginning I fought it and then I got a sponsor, and that sponsor was strict with me, and she brought me through the book and she taught me all the steps. And she said, we work the steps. She said, you work those steps and that's the only way out of your alcoholism. And she said, you work them for as long as you live. And she said, you don't have any excuses, Lilllie. She said, you need to be involved in service. And I've been involved in service since I think I was about 30 days sober. And I'm still involved in service to this day. I'm a person that firmly believes that if you're not involved in service, that you're missing the boat. That's where all the fun is. If you don't believe me, ask all these girls that have the COM after their name, because I can guarantee you that when they were chatting back and forth about this conference this weekend, that they had a lot of fun and a lot of laughs, because that's the way it is when you're working this deal, And so I guess in closing, what I'd like to say to all of you is, I'm a very blessed human being today. After my mom passed, my brothers wanted to sell the house. And guess what? I wasn't even angry. In the beginning, I thought I wanted to stay there, but, then I got it down on my knees and I said, God, please put me wherever I can do the most good. God put me in this little senior townhouse. I have 3 little rooms. They're beautiful little rooms. They're my rooms. I have a front yard and a backyard. I have flowers in the summer and I have snow in the winter. But guess what? I don't have to shovel anymore. I can look out the window on a snowy day and see somebody out there shoveling my sidewalk. And that's a wonderful feeling. I have a new car I just bought. I just could relate with my mom because I just had a knee replacement. It was the hardest thing I ever did. I look back at it now and I think my mother was the strongest woman I ever knew, because I cried the whole time. For 2 months after I had that knee surgery, I was like, my God, this hurts, and today I'm better, today I'm better, today I talked to my sponsor on the phone in the morning, God has been very good to me. God has blessed me. I will tell you that I will ask you in closing that you pray for my son that's still living. He is an alcoholic and a drug addict, and he's out there. I go to Al-Anon. It was really great to hear Robin, because I have to mind my own business. And for years I tried everything. And, that sponsor, she said to me, Lilllie, if you could have fixed him, he would have been perfect by now, because you tried everything in your bag of tricks. And, today my relationship with him is, I send him a message once a week. I send him a message and go, how are you doing? Mom, just wanted to let you know I love you. And I leave it at that. And I don't ask questions. And I realized today that when you ask an alcoholic questions, it doesn't come out the way it sounds. Like if I said, how are you doing? What he hears is, did you get a job? Are you working? What's going on? Where are you living? Are you with some lousy woman again? Or have you picked up your piece? And I got thinking about that. And I thought, that's what I always heard. If anybody ever asked me how I was doing when I was drinking, it was, I'm fine. So today I don't ask those questions. Today, I just simply say, hi, it's Mom. Just wanted to let you know I'm thinking of you and I love you. Hope everything's okay. And sometimes he answers and sometimes he don't. But I'd ask you to pray for him because I really pray that he finds his way back to be with all of us, because this is the greatest reality show on the face of the earth. This is the greatest program that anybody could ever be in. This is a whole new way of living. And wouldn't it be great if everybody in the world had 12 steps and had sponsors that took them through them? Thank you very much for letting me share.